Jake, how's it going,
Hello.
buddy?
I'm well. I'm excited to be here today. This is a show, Anthony. How long have we were talking about this in the pre-show? We've been waiting for the show for on the order of 7-8 years, something like that.
Almost the whole time that we've done this show, we've said, hey, can you come on this show yet? No. Can you come on the show yet? No. How about once you retire, can you come on this show yet? Randy Riddle, LeonRunningMan himself. How's it going?
Yep. Hey, afternoon.
We're very excited to see what kind of ITAR secrets we can sneak out of you
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, you were like, can you send me a list of topics you want to talk about? I'm like, I don't know, all the stories that you've ever told in the Discord. Like that would probably be a good list to run through.
Yeah. I've been in the Discord for 8 years, I guess. I was looked up my data the other day, and it's like, wow, it's hard to believe it's been that long. I've been in small launch for 20 years, and in the Discord for almost half of that. So that's amazing.
Wow. And there's been how many launches? Fewer than that.
Oh gosh, yeah, probably 30 or so, something on that order.
Pretty good.
Okay. All right.
And don't dig into it too soon, Jake. It's all show content. Save it.
I know. I'm just so excited.
Whoa, your mic's floating away on you.
I know. It's excited too. It's just like yeah. Drinks. What do you got here today, boys?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on?
What do you got out there, Randy? Early?
I got
early crowd today?
a Marble Brewery IPA here. So local Marble's a local brewery here in Albuquerque, and
That's weird.
so I'm having that. Yeah.
Why did it zoom in
And
like
I'm
that?
also got it in a Boney Bob mug. This is an old skull style glass mug that from one of my previous jobs. So I think it originally came from a place in Florida, like the seafood restaurant Treasure Island or something like that. But
Wow.
we adopted
some
it
history.
as our mascot. So
It's like
That's a
from
good
medieval
item.
times or something.
It's more of a your area kind of thing, Jake. Drinking out of a skull. Like feels pretty Mayan, no?
there you go. Yeah. Day of the Dead.
Mead, what do you got down there?
No, I went to the import section this week, and this one had a goat on it, and I was like, Leon's a goat, so I'm gonna do that one. It's Czech,
Dark.
and I know nothing about this, so that's what I got it because it had a cool label. Also, you can check this out. This is a fun Mexico thing that they do. They got to put the stuff in Spanish, so they put a sticker over the.
Oh, that's funny.
That
Good
is funny.
export control. I have a Victory Prima Pills, which I have had a million times, and I love the can. It's delicious, and it's cold here, so I probably should have had something darker like you, Jake.
Yeah, cold there and not here, so we're doing that.
How's it
doing
pouring?
it backwards today. Pouring pretty nice.
Yeah, I heard it was like 70s on the East Coast today with the clouds from the hurricane coming through.
Yes. It's one of those weird skirting hurricanes, though. Wow, look at that thing.
There you go.
Wow, nice.
I got my
Wow.
frog and onion pub.
Keep making me go to your one shot.
I'll get that. There you go.
The
Frog and onion
Onion.
pub from Bermuda.
Man, it's the
Cool.
easiest to name pubs. You just pick two nouns, and you got it.
The horse and kettle, yeah.
Yeah, just pick two things, and you got a pub. Randy, you mentioned
that's
North
cool.
Carolina. You're from or lived there for a while?
Yeah, I grew up in North Carolina. Yeah, I went to college there. A little town called Mount Airy up in the mountains in North Carolina. Our claim to fame was it's the town that Andy Griffith is from, so his hometown.
That's an
So
old
that,
claim to fame.
Yep.
Yeah.
Puts a date on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and they still
All right, so
have
not
one
the
of the
beach
big
side,
one
though,
of the big
with the
festivals
waves.
they do there is they do an autumn leaves festival each year in the fall, and you can still go and get a ride in Andy's squad car downtown, for the touristy thing. So they're milking it. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Jake's looking it up on maps. Look at him over there. He's like,
I'm 100%
Yeah.
looking up on a map.
Yeah.
Like, where
it's not
is
the
this?
part with the
This is,
huge storm surge right now. That
No,
it's
no,
not
no.
that end of North Carolina.
Not that
I
end,
drove. I drove through North Carolina once, and so I'm just trying to like place it on on the road I was on. Is it close to it or far from it?
What
Did you
road
go
were
up
you on?
77 or
95?
95?
Yeah.
Well, no, because I came. Let me see. I don't think it was 95. I think it might have been the other way, like through, because I came from Ontario, went down, I drove to Florida, so I came around through Pittsburgh and down from there. So wherever that gets me,
Yeah, you were either on 85 or 95 then coming through the coast there.
You tell me. I don't know. But
so how did you go from Andy Griffith's tourist department to small launch? What was the moment?
Oh gosh, yeah,
you made that jump.
Yeah, I went to the Air Force gave me a scholarship to college, so I went to NC State on an Air Force scholarship, and so went into the Air Force from there and enjoyed the Air Force, and so I did 22 years as an officer in the Air Force, and then had assignments in Ohio and Texas and Alaska, and the last assignment was in New Mexico. Retired from active duty there in New Mexico, and I actually did all my Air Force job. Up to my last assignment, I was all aircraft, and so I worked in aircraft depot. I worked in doing some aircraft intelligence. I was in a fighter wing up in Alaska, and then the Air Base
aircraft
wing.
Intelligence.
I worked at the Foreign Technology Division, so we did that was my first assignment up in Ohio, and now it's the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, I think is NASIC, and worked on Soviet at that time surface-to-air missiles and aircraft radars and that kind of stuff. So that was very very interesting job, and not that great a place to work, but it was a very very interesting work, and then went to did ops jobs and ended up here at the Air Base wing here at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, and did 3 or 4 jobs here and ended up retiring here. My last job was in the Rocket Systems Launch Program, which is the Air Force small launch program here at Kirtland Air Force Base, with some other small space stuff that goes on here. And ended up retiring out of that job, and then doing another. Came back to work for initially Missile Defense Agency as one of the Rocket Small Launch Program's customers. And then after about 4 years with that Missile Defense Agency, I jumped back over to the Air Force side as a civil servant, and then did another 14 years in the chief engineer position for the Small Launch Program. So it's been a great career. I grew up in farm country, North Carolina, and ended up kind of hitting it big with the Air Force scholarship, and enjoyed doing lots of different kinds of engineering over the course of that career, and had lots of great jobs, and it was always interesting. Look forward to coming to work. Just about every job I had was very interesting. I'm kind of an eclectic interest, and so I enjoyed the aspect of jumping from job to job every 3 or 4 years, and doing something totally different, which is kind of the way they do when you're an engineering officer, and enjoyed all of that, and then kind of hit my stride with the small launch program towards the end of my active duty time, and decided to dig into that. The thing I loved about the small launch activity is most of the funding that we had is actually customer funding. So it's kind of the closest thing to running a business you can get, and still, within the Department of Defense, because we had to, work with our customers and make sure we got them what they needed for the mission that they were flying, and report the financials to them, and all of that kind of stuff. And so it was very. So
you
much
mean like the
running
agency that then works with you, like another agency comes to you and says, I have this mission and this much money, like figure out how to get me there?
That's kind of the cornerstone of the small launch program that we run is the Rocket Systems Launch Program inherited all of the retired ICBM motors, so all the Minuteman 1 and 2 motors, and eventually the Peacekeeper fleet as well. And so we all of those motors, instead of just destroying them outright, which would cost a lot of money, we put them into storage, and we run an aging surveillance program to make sure the motors are still good to work. And then we use those motors for a variety of customer needs, targets for the Missile Defense Agency, some research and development type stuff for the Army, space launch for the Air Force and the NRO, and those sorts of customers. So it's a lot. It was running a business, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. By that time in my career, early in my career, I hated the program management kind of stuff, and I just wanted to do pure engineering. But then after about 20 years, it's like, no, okay, now I'm kind of getting into
once
the
your back
program
starts to hurt a
management
little
side of
bit,
things.
you want to maybe do some paperwork, right?
Yep.
Wait, so tell me what Soviet things you worked on in the aircraft intelligence. You mentioned some Soviet surface to air, and did you say ICBM?
Didn't work ICBMs in that
Okay.
job. It was mostly surface to air missiles and aircraft was
I was going
mostly
to say,
what I
you could have
worked
been one
on
of the
in that
few
job.
people who worked on ICBMs from both sides of the Cold War. Like you would have
Could have been,
had,
yeah.
yeah.
That one was not my specialty in that job. So that
Man.
I worked in, that was what was called the simulation validation engineer, and so my job was to evaluate the simulators that the Air Force uses in training and training and testing kind of activities, and validate that they adequately represent the Soviet threat. Was kind of the idea of that job.
I was going to say that sounded like more like the Alaska job, but the Ohio one sounds maybe more like you were spying on us. I don't know what's going on there. There's something you can't tell me, but
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. That you getting to learn how the different systems work, and as it so happened, when I was working at the Foreign Technology Division, Tom Clancy was big into he was a rising star at that time, and he published the book Red Storm Rising, which was about the same systems that I was learning about in that job. And so I was reading his novel at night and going, how does he know that, kind of stuff.
Oh, I was waiting for you to reveal yourself as the source of Tom Clancy information. It's like, wow. It's a real unmasking.
that's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so the small launch program, you're saying it started out with what do we do with all these old ICBM motors?
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, the small launch industry developed, and it turned into, okay, can we also buy some vehicles and launches from other providers? Was that an awkward growing phase?
It was a little bit awkward. Yeah, it was interesting. We had the workhorse contract during my tenure within the program was called the Orbital Suborbital Program Contract. So we had OSP-1, which was a contract with Orbital Sciences Corporation at the time to take the Minuteman motors and be able to fly those as either an ICBM class target or a space launch vehicle. Then when we did the follow-on contract, the OSP-2 was literally awarded like the day I walked into the door of the program. One of my first staff meetings that I sat in on as when I was active duty was the contracting officer announcing that they had just awarded the OSP-2 contract. And so the OSP-2 contract then added the Peacekeeper motors as a capability for space launch. And then I really got my teeth into the program as we were moving from OSP-2 to OSP-3. Which was the Space and Missile Systems Center at that time, we were looking to grow that capability from just focused on recycling the ICBMs to a broader market. Specifically, they were targeting with the OSP-3 contract, we were looking at growing from small launch to medium launch, and growing the number of providers from just one that we had in Orbital Sciences Corporation to having multiple providers that we could compete each mission with. A lot like the NSSL Lane 1 program. Now we were going through that stage of the program when I first got into RSLP, in that 2006 time frame. And it was a lot of growing pains. We had a lot of discussions with, at that time, SpaceX was looking to get into the market, and they ended up being one of the awardees on OSP-3. And one of the challenges that we had to work our way through in opening the door for these new commercial providers that were coming on board with small launch capabilities was the pricing structure on the contract, because we had very successful pricing with the OSP-1 and 2 contracts versus our previous contracts that we had, because we moved from a kind of the traditional cost plus fixed fee kind of contract to a more incentivized contract. With Orbital Sciences, the OSP-1 and 2, the primary task order types on those was something called the fixed price incentive firm, which is there's a cap on what you're going to pay for the mission, but if the contractor has to track their costs, and if they're able to come in under the cost that they bid, they actually get an extra incentive fee. So the government gets to keep some of the money, and the contractor gets to make a little extra money in terms of profit on that contract. So it's a good incentivized structure. But the limitation on that is the contractor has to track their costs. And so our early initial discussions with SpaceX, when they were interested in getting on OSP-3, SpaceX and others was we do not have a certified cost tracking system. The quote from the vice president we were working with was, "Our people don't fill out time cards, so we can't track costs. You've got to make this thing firm fixed price." And so that was one of our, and we were kind of like, oh, we're not used to working with firm fixed price. Most of our stuff has been this fixed price incentive firm, where we know what the actual costs are and how are we going to do that. But we eventually got through that. That ended up being a decision that went all the way to the source selection, the source decision authority that we had, was what kind of contract were we going to put into that? What kind of contract pricing structure were we going to put into place? And we had a big meeting to come to that decision.
That seems like such an interesting time for the work you were doing, because like not only are you've got, first of all, you have this inventory of stuff that is just not designed to be a consumer product, like just straight up, that's not what it was for, right? And then you're like, you're already yeah, you're already adapting that to like a more consumer like product, and then you have this whole like the other pressure from the other side, which is like these new entrants like SpaceX that are just like completely changing how we contract these things. And it feels like it's very chaotic, like trying to figure out like, how do I sell this thing in this today in the future of procurement? It's like very, very bizarre conflicts of historical events in the broad history of space launch procurement.
Yeah, it is. And those kinds of decisions have a lot of implications. One of the bigger program, NSSL, when they were looking at opening up to provide more competition, they went through a lot of the same growing pains. They had always done, a cost-based sort of contracts, in part because when you have a strategic program like that that's of interest to the nation, that you've got to make sure that you're always going to have the capability to get spacecraft on orbit like that. One of the things you want to make sure is that you know what the actual costs are, so that you can properly budget in the future, because kind of the nightmare scenario is that you go into this firm fixed price thing, and the contractor buys in for the first few launches, and then you get surprised that the price goes up all of a sudden because they can charge whatever they want to. And so there was a lot of concern in the costing community that
or they did the math wrong and they go out of business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was a big concern about moving to that model, was losing that insight into what it actually costs to build one of these things. And we were able to work through that on our side just by accepting a little more pricing risk in ours, because the small launch program is not a major defense acquisition program like the NSSL program is, where if the program fails, you might lose the war, kind of thing. So
yeah, different stakes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, that's super interesting. I don't know what to.
And then so that was 06. So like you also had to, you started to see, and probably the people like yourself and those around you that could see how this was going to go, like you kind of had the shape of how this might shake out if SpaceX or others were successful in that model. But by the next round, OSP4, it was a totally different ball game, where there was too many small launchers being worked on. And you went from one end to the other end pretty quick on like, all right, how do we keep some of these knuckleheads out?
Yeah, we did go, and so we were, OSP3. When we did OSP3, it was a very different acquisition. We ended up awarding that contract about November 2013, if I remember correctly. And it was a lane 1, lane 2 sort of situation, and we had 2 lane 1 competitors and 2 lane 2. The lane 1 competitors were Lockheed Martin and Orbital Sciences, and lane 2, which was the bigger one, was Orbital Sciences and SpaceX. And so it was still a limited pool. We knew who the players were. We did a lot of evaluation on the front end of OSP3 to make sure that everybody we vetted onto the contract had their act together. They had solid engineering program, solid safety program. We knew what the costs were going to be. OSP3, we actually had a pre-priced list of all the options of things we might want to buy on the contract, those sorts of things. But the downside of doing that is you spend a lot of time on the front end doing evaluations of things. And so it took us like 2 years to award that contract. because we had a huge amount of evaluation criteria. And then we ended up not using the contract that much because we had that thing called sequestration that came in about the time we awarded OSP3, and we ended up only buying about 5 missions off of that contract. And so, which was, almost an order of magnitude below the traffic we expected to see on the contract. And so when we got to OSP4, there was a much larger, because of the success of SpaceX, there were lots of companies wanting to get into the small launch market. And so we had kind of been, we used the term snake bit by front loading the OSP3 contract. And so we kind of went to the other extreme on OSP4, set the evaluation bar, very low, and said, we're not going to dig into everybody's system safety program and everybody's engineering program and all of that. We're just we're going to look at, you've got to convince us that you're able to launch a rocket. And if you can convince us you're able to launch a rocket, we'll on-ramp you to OSP4, and then you can compete for the missions. And so we saved a lot of the evaluation for once we were actually doing the individual mission competitions. And that probably, if I had that decision to do over again, I would probably stick with that, because that has turned out to be a pretty good model. And we were able to still, even though we were doing a significant amount of evaluations for each mission, we were able to execute those in a pretty quick time frame, within about 4 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to look up what the original list of providers were, because was this the one with like some of the weird? Who was the company with like the carrier plane and the drone plane and the?
Yeah, that was gosh,
Avon
the name
or
of the plane
something?
is Rock. No, the carrier plane.
No, not
was,
Stratolaunch.
the Rock.
The other weird one, like the weird little.
Oh, Avon.
Yeah,
Avon has a carrier plane. Yeah.
Yes, but they don't really exist anymore. They're not interested in launch anymore.
They're still around. Yeah, they're still around nibbling at. They've got. We still have. When I left the program, we still had one open contract with them for a launch, and they were working towards that. I don't know how things have gone since then. So.
They're Moon Expressing it out there, or what?
Yeah, we were just talking pre-show about Moon Express, how they just stopped. Snow
They
Grand
just
collapse.
stopped being. Yeah.
I mean, were there times where, like, when you're saying you adopted that different approach to on-ramp the initial competitors, was there flack internally about taking that approach and hope and wishing that you went with like higher gates at the start, or was it like, yeah, sure, let's roll the dice and let's see how it plays out?
No, there was general I think agreement within the team that this is the right way to, we kind of got burned how we did things last time, and the environment has changed and our motivations have changed, and the government is interested in interested in getting new providers into the business, and not being overly restrictive about making it too hard to get into the business. And so it was a good balance of all the interests involved out there. I think that to go at that point in time to go forward with that change in how we were doing things. So I think there was general agreement across the board. I don't think there was any strife as to whether we're going down the wrong pathway there.
How would you do it today, in that we've seen so many small launch providers just evaporate for a variety of reasons?
I think I would add probably every time you make that decision, the pendulum's going to swing back the other way a little bit, probably. So, given the experience that we've had with a couple of folks falling out from under us, we would probably swing that a little bit the other way and put a little more teeth into it. One of the things that's really hard to judge, with a private company is even the company a lot of times would not be able to tell you, how viable is it that you're going to be here 2 years from now?
Right.
Because there's a lot of things that can happen in 2 years. And if they win some business, if they're successful in their engineering development efforts, things are going to be great. If 3 or 4 of those things go wrong, they're not going to be there. And so that's really tough to have that crystal ball. And so really
no one plans to go out of business. So.
Right.
No.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the kind of the choice you got to make is, are we going to on-ramp people before they've actually been successful at launching something, or are we going to wait until that point in time? And so, we made that decision with OSP4 to go ahead and open the on-ramp to people who had not launched yet. Probably at the strategic level, it's more of a you want to make a choice that is more risk averse than that. It has less risk that those companies are going to go out of business, and so you tend more toward having a requirement that you've actually already flown, and done that before, demonstrated that you have the capability.
There's so many variables in like a job like that, like ultimately the task here is like trying to stand up markets that don't exist, right? Which is like it just seems to me like an incredibly complex problem. And doing this for as long as we have, Anthony, like, and watching these cycles, a bunch of companies come in and a bunch of them go, and then some stick around and they change, and just like then this market's important and then that market's important. It's today it's rockets, the next day it's landers, then it's satellites, then it's it just bounces all around.
Golden Dome.
And it's very there's a lot of flux, right? And it's like it seems like it's a very challenging issue, and I'm curious to hear your take on this, Randy. That like just hindsight's easy, but I feel like everyone's just kind of just doing their best and like seeing what happens, and then you just go from there. I don't know. It's funny to hear you kind of talk about it like in a very you're very level-headed the way you kind of explain these things. You always have been, at least with us. But it just seems like it's very Wild West, and I don't know if there's like the right answer for any of these problems ever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you just have to make a choice. What in our case, it's as the government program. We are making decisions of what's in the best interest of the government, and in these situations where you've got a very rapidly changing market with lots of emerging providers. You can make an argument that it's in the government's best interest to provide seed corn out there, and lean forward a little bit, work with some of these new providers to help get them to, provide some opportunities for them to get to a viable capability, because in the long run, that's going to be better for, for the government and for the U.S. taxpayer, to have new providers, to have a robust, competitive environment. And, some of them are going to make it and some of them are maybe not. But, you've got to make a decision there that, are we just going to buy the successful ones, or are we going to cultivate the field a little bit and maybe help the industry get to a point where it's more viable? They have more viable options out there. And that was kind of where we went. We went strategic with that.
The really obvious narrative for that question is, at least for our listeners, probably gonna be like the idea of Starliner and Dragon, right? And there's like so much hindsight that you can go, wow, what a waste of money Starliner has been so far. Like that did not go the way we wanted it to go. And yet, like, if you go back to the decision point of that, like, I don't know if we should have done differently. Like the whole point of that, having the two, was, because of it's a recognition of how dynamic that environment is. Right. And so there's, it's like when you're looking forward from a point in time, you just have no idea and you make your best guess. When you're looking back, you have all the information and you're wrong, but it doesn't change what you would have done. And it's very chaotic.
Right. Yeah, you got to make those decisions about what is in our best interest in both balancing that short term and the short term pain and the long term payoff of those kinds of decisions. So,
yeah.
How do you feel like with some of these, right? Either a company goes out of business or a budgetary situation changes on formerly your end of the equation. There's always seems like there's a tension with the timelines of space missions, and then like they tend to be very long, or payload lead times are long, or whatever the case is. But then something can happen in a second that changes what you actually want to do with that payload, whether it's like the program mission has changed entirely, the company decided they're not going to build that rocket anymore, they're going to build a different one, and they want to convince you to just keep paying them so that they can go on the different rocket. Like, is there as much flexibility as there needs to be on how those things get manifested, or does that actually have to be handled differently, like the way that Space Force is kind of assigning they choose who's going to fly the NSSL missions, and then they assign them about a year or two out from actual launch? Like, is that even enough flexibility, or do you feel like it kind of handcuffed you in certain situations where you just had to ride it out when it was clear that Virgin Orbit was going out of business or whatever, and they weren't going to actually be able to complete the task order. I don't know. That might have been too specific of a case, but it was the one top of mind for me.
Yeah, yeah. There's, you do have to operate within, quite within some constraints, on the government side. The primary one being funding, because when we go put these launch activities on contract, that's tied to a funding source, and the funding has a certain life on it. That if it's a 2-year money or 3-year money, you've got to get it obligated before the obligation authority dies on it. And then there's a 5-year clock that starts ticking on it. That once the money has expired, you've got to get whatever the effort is, you got to get it done within 5 years. And you don't, if you try to go back and ask for forgiveness on, I wasn't able to spend this money, can I have some more? There's just no appetite for that.
We got to take a side tangent, and you got to explain to us how the hell money works, because I think we were
talking
some shit about it a couple weeks ago of like, is there a bank account? And you were like, there's not a bank account. That's not how it works.
There's not a bank. Yeah. That is an interesting. That is one of the interesting discussions that we've had from time to time on the Discord, is kind of how the government money works. And number one, there is no bank. The government does not have, in general, the government does not have money. The only part of the government that has money is the U.S. Treasury, and they've got it all. And largely speaking, there's a few exceptions out there, but like in the government program office, you don't have a bank account. You have what's called obligation authority, which means the budget gets passed, and we get told, you as the small launch program, you have this much budget authority, and so our contracting officer is the person who is invested with the authority to obligate the government to go buy things using that money. And so, when the FY25 budget gets passed, you get told, here's how much FY25 money you have, and here's what you're supposed to use it for. And so we put together, we have a plan that we go into the fiscal year with that says, here's what we're going to spend all of our money on. And then you go forward and you go execute that plan. And that plan is tied to primarily contracts, and so each of those contracts has a procurement activity that you've got to go through to either have a source selection to decide who's going to do that launch, go put a task order on contract to go do the mission assurance, put a task order on contract to go provide technical support for the mission. And so there's a timeline there to get all of that money obligated, to get all of those contract actions executed, so that all of your money is obligated, so that you don't get it taken the next year. And because believe me, we make monthly reports on, here's the plan. You were supposed to be 25% obligated here in February. You're only 22% obligated. How are you going to get better? Or should we just take 3% of your budget? And you go screaming back, no, don't take my budget, And so that is one of the things that program managers spend a lot of time on, is nailing down those very specific actions to get the money obligated on the timeline you promised you were going to get it obligated on, and that you're required to get it obligated on, so that you don't have a different problem of trying to figure out how you're going to make up for the fact that you lost $5 million because you couldn't get it obligated in time, and which will throw your mission for an even bigger curve. So then once you get the money on contract, it's obligated, and so that gets you through that initial gate. But then there's a 5-year timeline to get the money actually expended, because the contracts can't just go on forever. And if you have a mission,
hold up on that. Yeah. Okay, there's a couple of these that clearly can. So
challenge accepted.
If you can't get the money spent, then you got to go get some more money, and those are very uncomfortable conversations to have. That I wasn't able to get. I put this person on contract, but they were not able to get the money expended in time, and so the money died, and I need to get replacement money for it. Those are very uncomfortable conversations, and
replacement money.
I don't think I've ever had a successful one of those.
Replacement money. Okay.
I lost my money. I need the replacement money.
Yeah. Yeah. But what happens, like, okay, let's say you didn't spend $5 million that was obligated. like who is accounting for that on the back end that as a nation we didn't spend $5 million that we thought we did?
Well, that's just $5 million worth of debt that the U.S. Treasury never has to send the check for. And so, the money doesn't actually exist. And so we go through this whole process where we get a contractor on contract. The contractor goes and does the work.
You can tell how you're losing this. It doesn't exist. None of this shit I'm talking about actually exists. Keep going.
And that is all.
When the invoice is due, you print the money, and then when you collect taxes, you burn it. That's the only thing that you can do.
Yep. When the invoice comes due, like one of my jobs was I would approve the invoices when they came in. That yes, the contractor has fulfilled this part of the contract. They're now due to be paid this, $2, $3, $5 million, and we send it off to the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, and they approve it, and it goes to the U.S. Treasury, and the U.S. Treasury sends the money. That's the first point in time that the money actually exists. Is when the Treasury drops it into, SpaceX or Orbital Sciences or Lockheed Martin's bank account. And so the money doesn't actually.
You mean
have to
directly
be,
into
found.
Elon Musk's pockets personally? Is what you mean? I think that's what you mean. Yeah. Did you put all your notes in, by the way, Randy? Have you always filled out the notes on those invoices so none of your stuff got audited by Doge?
Oh, I'm sure some of it got audited, but mostly what they were after was the money that hadn't been spent yet. So,
which never existed. They don't have to worry about it.
It never existed yet.
Yeah.
So they never saved any money at all then.
It never existed.
I'm not going to say that. Yeah.
It's like a ghost story. Yeah. All right. I think I'm at least a little less confused than I was last time.
Basically, what you have to understand is that the Treasury Department has root access to your bank account, and they just backspace, and type in new numbers when they need to.
Well, and part of where the money, so when you write your check to the IRS, you send that money to the U.S. Treasury for your taxes. When part of that financing comes from when we buy T-bills, you're loaning the government your money, and that's what they do with it. Is they go pay that day's bills, with it. And,
what a wild time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You sent us a list of stories that you should tell, and one of them we skipped over, which was something about OSP3 and an awkward meeting that you had with Elon at some point, which I assume was about time cards.
No, the time card conversation was one of his VPs. We did have one awkward meeting with the one time I ever met him was we were running a contract called the Responsive Small Space Lift contract, which was a contract that was different. It was a new and innovative thing that we were doing because at that time SpaceX was working on the Falcon 1, probably the E by that time. And so they were advertising some very low price points, associated with that rocket. And so we set up a contract with some modified risk language, and that would have allowed SpaceX to compete for that contract. And it was another IDIQ kind of contract. So we had we awarded 2 contracts on the upfront to Orbital Sciences and to SpaceX. And we ended up not ever using. I think we only ever issued 1 task order on that contract because, again, they got hit primarily by sequestration because it was in that same time frame. But we did issue 1 RFP on that contract for a rapid turn mission that we needed to go fly. We had a customer who had a payload that needed to get on orbit, tomorrow. And so we had this rapid turn contract, and nobody was going to be able to meet the timeline, but we were interested, the timeline we needed, but we were looking for options to satisfy our customer's requirement as fast as possible. And so we thought, okay, this is what we built this contract for, let's go see what we can get. And we issued an RFP on that contract, and our 2 providers, Orbital and SpaceX, were off working on their proposals. And we got a contractor that came in with a different solution using a different contract for that mission, and it was a very viable, creative, innovative option to actually meet the timeline we needed for the launch. And so we withdrew that RFP, and SpaceX was not happy about us withdrawing that RFP, and Mr. Musk requested a meeting with my boss at the time, Colonel White, And I got to meet him, and we had a very uncomfortable meeting, and he was not a happy man.
Got to get those
So
Falcon
that
1E
was,
contracts on order, you
Yeah,
know?
not
They were
a
flying
happy
off
yep,
the shelves back in the day.
yep, yep.
flying off something.
Was it a ride share? What was the inventive method? Was this original spin launch? Are you holding out on us?
No, no,
You
no,
flung
no.
something
It
into
was
space?
no, it was a rocket that already basically it was repurposing a rocket that already existed, but the mission had been like delayed for years, and so
Hmm.
it was a let's repurpose that rocket and use it for this quick turn mission and buy a replacement for the rocket that's been delayed for years. And so it was, and it actually and everything, the timeline and the numbers and everything worked out. We were actually able to get that launch off the ground in like 4 months, which is pretty unheard of. So
Hmm.
at that time.
That's how you sell right there, Jake.
I want to,
Remove the old inventory.
I want to key in on something you said, because I actually have a very specific procurement question that I'm very interested in, and you kind of touched on it. So we're gonna. This is my one chance in my career.
Is this when you're going to say
Fire away.
boondoggle in this show, Jake? You're saying it once a
No.
show. Okay.
No. Okay, so we all know that government procurement has to be fair and transparent, and you should be going after the best price for the taxpayer. There's always like rules around what you're allowed to
Mm-hmm.
buy and why you buy it, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that you changed the contract, like the RFP, a little bit in order to allow someone to bid for something, right? And I'm trying to figure out where the heck the line is on that. Like, because I could write an RFP that says requirements, your rocket must say SpaceX on the side of it to fit the requirements of this contract. And then, wow, look at that, only SpaceX bid,
Yeah.
like I guess they're going to get how do you decide?
You would do it a
like,
little bit more. You would be like, your headquarters has to have an area code of whatever the Hawthorne area code is, right?
Yeah,
Like, you would do it a
there's lots
little,
of ways you can do it, right?
obfuscate a little. Yeah.
Yeah. Your
Well,
engines
yeah,
have
it's
to start with M,
yeah, the ultimate answer is there is a person at the agency who is who makes the final decision on the RFP, and it's normally what we call a source selection authority. So somebody that's a colonel or higher, colonel or an SES, who's the source selection authority on a given procurement, and they make the final decision about what the requirements are that go into the RFP. But that's typically a 1 hour meeting that you have where you brief the decision authority on here's what our requirements are, everything from the technical requirements associated with the mission, but also the evaluation requirements that you're going to use to decide who wins the mission. And so there's a lot of work that goes into that, shaping that from both the government side and from the contractor side. We will typically issue a draft RFP to all of the providers on the contract and say, here's our initial best guess at what we're going to need and what the government's thinking is on how we're going to make the decision. You get comments in from all of the companies, and the comments range from, hey, all the way from the minutia of, we think you missed a decimal point here in this number on the bandwidth, all the way up to, we think this one should be firm fixed price instead of fixed price incentive firm. So you get a full range of comments. And typically, when we would float a draft RFP for a mission task order, let's say, we would get somewhere between 40 and 50, 60 comments. And each of those comments from the contractor has to be adjudicated. And not only do you tell the decision authority what the comment you got and what you decide to do about it and get their approval on that, you also publish that. You're open kimono and you publish that to everybody. Here's all the questions that we got on the draft RFP, and here's our decision and our rationale for making that decision. So the primary thing there is to be open kimono with everybody on what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what kind of comments that you got and what you decided to do about them. And so that's what that's the primary way that you make sure you're on the legal up and up there, is by just telling everybody, here's why we decided to do it this way. And sometimes sometimes you have a very firm, that's just that this won't work for my customer because they need it to go to this orbit, and I'm sorry you don't have a launch pad that can get to that orbit, but
Yeah.
this is a solid technical requirement. This spacecraft has to go to that orbit. And sometimes it's that's kind of your input. We appreciate you responding. We could make the decision that way, but we are deciding at this point in time to make a different decision. But we'll take that into account for for future procurement. So sometimes you have you throw somebody a makeup later, on, it's like, well, okay, that was a really good comment, but that's a really good input, but we just can't do it this time around. But we'll take a good look at that next time and make sure that we keep the competitive environment as open as possible.
And then how do you, is there like a prep for, okay, we know we're going to get protests over this one, and do you like kind of get ready for whatever's coming your way, or is it not as predictable as it seems from the outside?
It's as long as we've had very few I'm trying to think of a protest that we actually had.
Yeah, you've never awarded something to Blue Origin, so wouldn't result in that. Typically as long as you're open communications with everybody about what you're doing and why, that tends to insulate you from the actual protests. And so sometimes there are bigger fish at play that you just can't do anything about. In case of NSSL, they're a much bigger fish than small launch, and so they tend to be more of a protest magnet for those very, very strategic reasons. So that we typically didn't have that much problem with that. Yeah, do you think that should stay that way? Do you think that there's, with the industry the way it is, that they could operate I guess that's what the other lane of NSSL is now, right? Is operating more in the way that you were all along, but everybody's working on a launch vehicle Falcon 9 size now. Do you feel like the stringent requirements of the 9 reference orbits and all that kind of stuff, like, does that still have a place? Is it still used too much? If you were to influence it, what would your route be?
No, that still has a place. I mean, those are valid requirements. They evolve a little bit every time, that every procurement, to make sure there's a long process leading up to each phase of the program there, to go validate are these still valid requirements? Is this still actually what we need? Is the customer who needed that orbit, are they still there? What's the probability that we would never have to use that orbit? Those sorts of things. So that there's a process that you go through each time you do the procurement, to make sure that that those are all still valid requirements. Especially if somebody pokes back at them, you may have to go re-verify again. Well, okay, maybe we don't need quite that much performance there anymore, because over the years the size of the satellites have come down. And maybe we don't need to send the aircraft carrier to that orbit anymore. Maybe now we can just send a tugboat, those sorts of things. So there's a pretty stringent review process each time you go issue an RFP like that, to make sure that the baseline requirements you're establishing are still valid for what the government needs.
I feel like the biggest criticism I see is that they currently exclude Impulse or any of these like last mile kind of orbital tug companies from actually competing on launch services, right? That you can't go, and if you're somebody who has to buy their own launch to then do the thing with your satellite, that is like too many middlemen. We're not doing that on this contract.
Right.
Does that feel like a thing that will ever get solved, or it's weird because that has to have launched off the Earth somehow, and then that imposes requirements on that launch vehicle that they're using as well?
I think that'll evolve as as those capabilities mature and the possibilities mature. That'll evolve. The difficulty there is keeping the playing field level, because tailoring your requirements for different kinds of launch solutions becomes very difficult. Then it becomes very difficult then to hold a competition, because you've got different kinds of players on the field, and how do you judge that? All of which is possible. It takes more thought on the front end of how you're going to divvy up the requirements, and are you going to have multiple competitions? Sometimes it's possible sometimes to divide up the requirements and say, for instance, I'm going to have one competition for the rocket and a second competition for the post boost vehicle. And okay, now I'm going to have those two competitions. Which do I buy first? Do I buy the rocket first and then tell the post boost folks, you've got to fit on this rocket, or do I buy the post boost vehicle first and say, okay, you've got to provide a rocket that matches this? So it brings in those sorts of complications. We had a contract for a while where we were kind of doing a middleman job between the launch providers and the spaceports. We had a separate spaceports contract, and we learned pretty quickly that you just can't manage that. And so we ended up with OSP3 and beyond. We ended up moving the spaceport work onto the launch service contract and telling the launch service contractors, you've got to go get the contract for the spaceport, because the government is just not a feasible business arrangement for the government to be the middleman deciding holding a separate competition for the spaceport from the competition for the launch vehicle, and that was just untenable. So
yeah, the level of abstraction is another one of those variables that you throw into this whole process, right? Like,
right,
yeah,
right.
You can go even one step higher and say, like, I'm not even going to build the payload. I just sell me some data, right? And you can go even further than that. So.
Be the NRO,
right.
Have really expensive satellites and buy all the imagery and do everything, do it all. How do you take?
I'm sure they've had some of those proposals before.
Yeah. How do you feel about I feel like there's a couple of players that are, not just a couple of players, like most of the industry is figuring out how do we fit into Golden Dome, and are we pivoting to missile defense, or are we like changing our offerings? I mean, ABL has pivoted entirely to missile defense related stuff. Is that something that you kind of saw coming, or was this a weird? I guess it's a vibe shift in the industry. Was it unexpected?
It is a vibe shift, and I can't say I saw that one coming. Certainly. The current emphasis and the money that's coming with Golden Dome is, the business is going to go where the money is, and so that's that now that it's got money associated with it. There a lot of people are going to be pivoting that way. There's going to be some stiff competition for that program, because there's big dollars there. Even getting a small piece of something that
they're
big.
there. They don't exist yet though. They're just potentially they might.
There's big obligation potential.
If you could pull it off, if you could spend it, it will exist. Big obligation.
Big obligation authority there.
It is interesting though, because it's a weird mix, right? Of like, for a long time, I feel like people like us who are space nerds are like, I mean, we make a lot of rockets. We just got to point them in the directions that are more fun to, like, go see what's at Jupiter, go see what's at, Jake's favorite comet that we're never going to visit or whatever. And then it took 20 years and all the geopolitical changes that have happened in that time for defense industry to become, like, cool to work in again. And that happened at the same moment as the Golden Dome program came about. So everyone who had small launch vehicles in particular, were like half of it worked, and you're like, well, I mean, the half that matters for missile defense worked, so let's just keep flying that. Like, shocker that Firefly Alpha is not just going haste style, like, oh well, our first stage is all right, we'll just use that, and we're not going to worry too much about the upper stage. Because that's really what it is. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It all happened at the same moment that so many of these launch providers had to rethink, what are we actually doing here? Are we going to go and compete with Falcon 9? Are we going to make a bigger rocket? Are we going to stay on the small side? I'm sure you have a spin launch story in the part of the country that you're in, and the people that you talk to many times. Like, I feel like you had did you visit spin launch once? Can you talk about that?
I never got to visit Spin Launch. I talked to them several times. I was looked at. They had an OTA with the DIU, and I worked with that team a little bit on
OTA with the DIU. It's a classic, man. What a line.
Yeah, defense. Yeah, and so I talked to those guys a lot, but I never actually. I believe it or not, it's only like 2 hours down the road, but I never actually got there to visit. So.
Yeah. Well, they talk a big obligation, right? So.
Yeah.
they've obligated a lot of cool launch services. So.
Are you comfortable to give us a spin launch opinion, or is it too close to the vest?
Yeah,
That's
I'd
enough.
rather not do that. Yeah,
That's enough of an
I
opinion.
was a skeptic. I mean, I was involved in the technical evaluation, on some of their proposals, and honestly, I'm skeptical. So it's certainly the stuff they're doing with it now with the doing the suborbital testing and stuff. It's pretty amazing that they've been able to make that work. The hard part is getting the rocket part to survive the environments, and so we'll see how that all pans out. So.
I mean, that's a sentence. So like that's hard for Starship as well right now. So
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
it's kind of the one
right.
problem.
Yikes.
Spin launch is
Yeah,
one of those things where I'm like, man, that shit would rock on the moon, and otherwise,
Oh yeah.
I don't know what you're doing out there.
We should get him on the show. Like, what are we waiting for?
We should.
You should. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be like going. We should go into it totally open and honest. Be like, we don't believe you. Come tell us why we're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, so there's like one argument that's been made to me is that it's like the Glomar Explorer. Like, this is a project that they're pasting over the top of like space launch, but actually there's like another thing happening here that is more useful and there's more utility
3D
elsewhere.
printing
But the only thing, yeah, right, exactly, the relativity thing, right? Like, what are you actually 3D printing? But I mean, a spin launch on the moon is awesome. Fling stuff back to Earth, man, just right off the surface. But the atmosphere
If
really
you can get escape
complicates it.
velocity with it, that's an awesome capability. Yeah.
Shrink right back to Earth. But in the atmosphere, in the soup, it's not as easy.
No.
So.
Well, and on the moon you wouldn't need the container, so.
Right. You just launch it.
Yeah, you're a trebuchet.
Now,
at
what are
that
you
point.
throwing? Are you throwing blocks of
Rocks from
regolith?
God.
Like, I don't know what you're. Yeah, rots from God.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Golden Dome. There, we're right back to
Golden
it.
Dome,
We're gonna
yeah,
source it from the moon, though. Yeah.
Spin launch is
Yeah.
just a giant lunar machine gun. Is all it really is here. So.
Yeah, translunar missile defense. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, now we're talking. Listen, you're
Now we're
retired
cooking.
now. You're
Now we're
available.
going.
If we want to found this, I think we could get
Yeah.
12
You can
to
join
$16 million dollars.
You can join the Off-Nominal consulting firm.
We should one time, Jake, try to go and pitch some startup and see who would believe us and what we could get. Like,
see
just
what money
one
we
time.
could get.
Yeah. Translunar missile defense might be the thing that we should do.
Yeah.
There you
do
go.
that.
Like, Golden Dome is great, but what about when China lands on the moon first? But then what are you going to do? And it's a good time to raise money like that, Jake.
It
Yep.
is. Yeah.
Yep.
I think we should go for it.
And we
Randy,
talk.
we have to have you back
missing
6 to
geopolitical
10
moments,
times,
so.
by the way. Like, if you want to make this a recurring segment, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't mind doing it again. Yeah.
Because we
Lots
barely
of
even cracked
different
the
pieces
surface.
of the business out there.
I want to hear
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Kodiak and spaceports, and that one time that there was almost a spaceport in Georgia, which
Almost. Yeah, they
Vector
almost got
was
there.
a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to hear about Space Force still.
Space Force. Well, he missed Space Force. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I miss Space Force as military, but I mean, I was actually, Space Force doesn't actually, I think yet, have any civilian positions. So all of the civilians that work for the Space Force are actually Air Force employees, and that's where I was. I was still
They've only
an Air Force
obligated them.
employee, but supporting the Space Force, right? Yeah. And same thing for reservists. They don't have reservists yet, but there's reservists, Air Force reservists who are still supporting the Space Force, in their previous Air Force reserve jobs. If you if you track
that,
all
Jake?
of that.
Is that clear?
I'm making the question list for next time. It's like, what are those?
Oh, we had
big
one
words?
question in the chat from Benjamin that I think we should end on, which is, what is
Okay.
the date that the last thing you worked on will be declassified? The last.
Oh, my
or,
goodness.
I think let's rephrase
Last
this. I think what he
classified
means is
thing.
not even the last one, but what is the farthest out date of declassification? Is that what you mean? I think this might be what he means.
Yeah, I think those can go out as far as 50 years. So, and there's some stuff that'll probably never be totally declassified, like the strategic stuff.
Like what?
That
Like the what? I thought you were about to give it away. Zuma? Is Zuma in that list? You don't have to tell us, but do you know what happened to Zuma?
I do not know what happened to Zuma. No, I would love to know the answer to that. but I do not know anything about that one.
We got to go deeper. We got to go one level up.
That's a great conspiracy theory fodder there, for sure.
That was such a fun time on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was excellent.
Superb.
My God, we have too much. We could have went 3 hours. This could have been a monster episode, but
Yeah, it could have been.
we'll have to do a meetup in New Mexico because I love New Mexico. I had we
it's
missed each other
beautiful
when
here.
I was out there.
Right.
Man, what a state. Highly recommend.
It is beautiful. Yep. I was up on the mountain with the dog this morning, getting in a nice hike. It's beautiful here, even in the 90s. Nice breeze on the mountain. So.
It's a great
Love it.
place.
Love it.
What are we doing next week, Jake?
Holy smokes! I got to look it up. Our schedule's been like so wild lately. Let me just see. Pulling it up. We are talking with Ed. I might say it wrong. Ed Gee. I'm gonna guess as that's how we're saying it. This is the problem with communicating only via text. He's from Ethereum. This is a hard word,
Unpronounceable. It'll be a great show. It's happening next week.
It's got a diphthong in it, I think. So, but it's gonna talk about satellites and some cool technology they're working on and stuff. So it's gonna be good.
Who knows? If you made any sense of that, let us know. Completely nonsensical plug, but I promise there will be a show next week. It'll be great.
Yeah, it's there. It's coming. It's good. So,
Randy, you're the best. I don't know if you have anything that you want to plug. Did you write a book yet or anything?
Oh no, and
Not
I just barely have any social media, so I got nothing to plug
Yeah.
there. So.
Come in the Discord. Hang out with Randy. He's the best.
Yep.
Off-Nominal.com
Yep, that's the best place.
Discord.
All right, y'all. Is the music playing, Jake? Something's
It is.
very weird. Is it? Okay,
Yeah,
I can't hear it. So
I'm
just-
vibing.
I hope it's not too loud because I can't hear it, and this is where we're at. I should be able to end the show today on like that one time, so I think I'm good. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
See ya. Thank you.